Richie Torres made a post about yours truly, Marc Lamont Hill. I was minding my own business in these Twitter streets or these X streets, whatever, and I started to see several comments directed toward me, tagging me and Richie Torres. As you know, Richie Torres is the congressman out of New York who is also super pro-Israel, staunch liberal Zionist, the whole nine. And I was like, what they mad at me for? And then I saw the context. Richie Torres is unhappy with me. Richie Torres is unhappy with me because of a commentary I made about him a couple weeks ago. Apparently, he watches Night School and he had thoughts and feelings. Here's what I said that got Richie Torres so damn mad.
And Richie Torres writes this bizarre treatise that is filled with just a bunch of foolishness, which I'll talk about. Because, yeah, he identifies as a liberal Zionist. At least you're being honest about that. But making it seem as if Israel is this innocent nation state surrounded by Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthis is ridiculous. Saying that you want Palestinians to be free and self-determined, but you want them to live in a demilitarized state. In other words, you want them to live under the weapon, under the literal gun of the Israeli military. You are talking about occupation, my friend, except we're not really friends. You keep talking about the Free Palestine movement as if it's bound up in violence, as if an oppressed and occupied people don't have a right to resist. I'm not going to adopt a respectability politics that says that somehow we can only support Palestinians if they say they're nonviolent. Sometimes you got to be violent. When you're fighting an oppressive, violent state, you absolutely have to be violent. Hugs and flowers don't get you free from an apartheid ethno state. Just saying.
So that was what I said. And then your boy Richie Torres had thoughts and feelings about what I said. Here's what Richie Torres wrote after seeing that video, and he posted that on his own X account. Then Richie Torres said the following. Marc Lamont Hill went into a tirade against me for calling for a nonviolent demilitarized Palestinian state. I first of all, the framing of things becomes instantly problematic, right? I'm going to show y'all something, what a tirade is. A tirade is a speech usually consisting of a long string of violent, emotionally charged words. I didn't use a string of violent, emotionally charged words, Richie Torres. But you're trying to frame me as angry and irrational, Richie Torres. But I didn't do that, Richie Torres. He said, for calling for a nonviolent, demilitarized Palestinian state. See, the problem is when you operate from the perspective of liberal Zionism and Western imperialism and racist Orientalism, that sentence right there seems like it makes a lot of sense and that it's harmless. All I asked for was a nonviolent, demilitarized Palestinian state. Yes, Richie, you did ask for that. And here's why it's a problem, Richie Torres. It's a problem, sir. Because nonviolence is an unreasonable ask against an oppressive force that is persistently and unyieldingly violent. That's the problem. You say you believe in a two-state solution. You say you believe in Israeli self-determination and freedom. What independent country or what independent state doesn't have any military? Is completely nonviolent. What state is not? If anything, as Max Weber talked about, the great sociologist, states fight for the monopoly of violence. We the only people that should be shooting people, not the everyday citizen, not the kid, certainly not the old man. We shouldn't be we shouldn't be shooting burglars when they come in our house unless we have to. Right? There's a way that the state should have the monopoly on violence. That's the argument, even from Western imperialist standards. But you're saying Palestinians, if you get a state, nonviolent, demilitarized. How dare you? That would make sense if Israel weren't operating as an oppressive force against Palestinians, which brings me to the next piece. Again, more misrepresentation. He, Marc Lamont Hill, accuses me of lying about Israel being supported by the likes surrounded, excuse me, by the likes of Hamas and Hezbollah. No, that's not what I said. But again, if you take a slice of what I said and lightly dip it in truth, and then the rest of it is lie all through the middle, then yeah, what you just said would make sense. I didn't say Israel's not surrounded by Hamas and Hezbollah. If you mean geographically that Hezbollah's here and Hamas is there, maybe Houthis are over here, that might be geographically accurate. Fine. That wasn't what I said, though. I said you act like Israel is this innocent nation state surrounded by Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis. My point is not that Hamas and Hezbollah and the Ansar Allah, the Houthis aren't there. My point is we need to ask why. Israel is not innocent. Israel has no claims to innocence. Israel cannot say that we're just here minding our own business and these gruesome Arab nations keep closing in. That is a lie. It's a good fundraising tool. It's a good way to keep Netanyahu in power, but it isn't true. Then he says, never mind the mass murder of 1,200 Israelis by the former or the displacement of 100,000 Israelis and the firing of 7,000 rockets by the latter. Again, I didn't say that. I've said repeatedly that I don't believe in the killing of civilians or the killing or kidnapping of civilians. That's my position. I've said that consistently. But Richie Torres isn't here to communicate the truth. He's here to make me look bad. By smearing your opponent, you can then say and do whatever you want, right? He says, Marc Lamont Hill insists Palestinians absolutely have a right to be violent. Yes, it's called self-defense. You can flower it up all you want, but yes, Palestinians have a right to self-defense. And not just against direct military invasions. Also, the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem effectively is a form of violence. And occupied people have a right to resist. But what Israel does not have a right to do is defend itself in places where it is engaged in a military occupation. So, no, I don't deny or denounce the notion that Palestinians have a right to be violent. Not unrestricted or unlimited violence, not indiscriminate violence, not disproportionate violence. Israel does all that. But you have a right to self-defense. And again, not just somebody has a gun to your head, but also to live under military conditions, to live in the Gaza Strip, to live in Ramallah, to live in El Beira, to live in Tulkarm, to live any of these places, Jenin, especially Jenin right now, is to be an extraordinary risk. And you absolutely have a right to defend yourself against that. Does the right to violence extend to the execution of 6 hostages by Hamas? Does it include the abduction of an infant? Of course not, in both cases. But he frames it as this rhetorical question that I can't answer, so that the person reading him generously or in good faith will assume that I'm saying that Palestinians have a right to execute hostages and steal babies. And of course they don't. No one does. But we also have to remember that the Israeli military is accused credibly of lots of crimes against humanity, lots of war crimes, lots of violations of international law, etc. So if you're really that outraged, Richie Torres, you can also look at Israel, and you got a whole lot of investment in one thing, but maybe you shouldn't. And then he says the Western anti
writes this bizarre treatise that is filled.
Scared the shit out of me. I was like, who voice is that? He said, I dismiss any rejection of violence as respectability politics. That's not true. At no point did I say that any rejection of violence is respectability politics. I reject Israeli violence. I reject the violence of the genocide. I reject the violence of the Israeli occupation. I reject the violence of the siege of Gaza. I reject the violence that the Israeli military engages all around the region. I reject all of it. I'm not doing respectability politics. That's principle. And I don't romanticize or sanction all forms of resistance. I don't sanction or romanticize all Palestinian action. We have a right to be critical of violence. We have a right to ask questions about why we're using violence, how we're using violence, and what are the limits of those uses. We absolutely have a right to do that. But what I'm not going to do, and this is what I said, Richie Torres, is that I'm not going to hold Palestinians to some ridiculous standard of respectability politics that says that we can only honor a Palestinian if they were going to be the next Martin Luther King. What they always say, right? Who's the next Palestinian Martin Luther King? Where's the first Palestinian Martin Luther King? Y'all killed him. And when I say y'all, I mean the powerful around the world. The Ugandan Martin Luther King, the Venezuelan, Cuban, United Statesian Martin Luther King, all those places, the Lebanese Martin Luther King, the Syrian Martin Luther King. Every country wants a Martin Luther King to emerge. Every state wants a Martin Luther King to emerge, partially because they're not going to fundamentally disrupt the status quo of the state in terms of its right to violence. The state can remain violent when you got a Martin Luther King who's willing to use nonviolent methods. That's what these powerful countries always say they want. You're allowed to have Martin Luther King, yeah, I bet. But that just means, that's not disrespect Martin Luther King. It means y'all don't actually understand Martin King's legacy either. But I'm not reducing it all to respectability politics. I'm saying that sometimes you got to do something different. Anyway, Richie Torres, listen to me, Richie Torres. I don't believe that you believe all of this. I think that you are passionate about this issue. I think that you are not sufficiently informed on this issue. And I don't say that with any condescension or anything like that. Some of the points you make seem to be missing serious gaps in historical analysis. Even if I agreed with you, I would say that. The fact that I don't makes it easier. You are actively trying to smear me, Richie Torres. You're actively trying to smear Mehdi Hassan. You're actively trying to smear other prominent voices so that there'll be nobody pushing back against your ridiculousness. But I'm not leaving. I'm not backing down. I'm not going anywhere, Richie Torres. I'd love to have a debate with you. I'd love to have a conversation with you. It can be public. It can be private. But what you're doing right now, the smear campaigns, the misrepresentations, the slippery logic, I can't tell how much of it is you not being strong on this issue and how much of this is innate natural ability or inability and how much of this is you being cunning and careful. I don't know. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that you are just wrong and not manipulative, dishonest, or cynical. But your political record suggests that you are cynical. It suggests that you understand that you can take on this issue and be the Black liberal Zionist right now, the brown liberal Zionist right now, and get support, get funding, get all the things that comes from supporting right-wing interests, even from the left. Richie Torres, I don't know what made you put them bars out against me. I don't know what made you write that tweet about me, but it feels like at a moment where people are coming together on certain issues, at a moment where the radical left is getting voices, the progressives are getting. The point is, you're trying to smear people who matter to these conversations so that we don't have to reckon with the arguments. Well, it ain't gonna work these parts. Mehdi Hassan gonna make you hear that argument. Noda Adikat is gonna make you hear that argument. Norman Finkelstein is gonna make you hear that argument. And I pray that I'll be able to make you hear my argument. But please stop with the BS, Richie Torres. You know what you're doing. And you wound up all those voices, all those people. You misrepresented to all those people, getting them outraged for no good reason. Now you got to deal with that, or you should have to deal with that, Richie Torres.